So the budget's been and gone, and sometimes it takes a few days to sort of just take stock of what's happened, let things unravel, and then analyze everything. And I think it's become pretty clear that what's happened was obviously pretty much in line with what we expected. Was yeah, the level of taxes have gone up, even though Rachel Reeves said last time around that they wouldn't, even though Labour said in their manifesto that they wouldn't raise taxes. Well, that, how did that go? Um, I think before we start, we've only got 5 minutes, but one thing I did want to sort of talk about is the one thing that a lot of people haven't spoken about so far is some of the big multinational organizations, the big tech giants, the big coffee houses, the organizations that for years and years and years get away with paying absolutely no tax or the minimal amount possible. And they've been doing this for so long now through legal and tax loopholes. And it's about time some of these giants were brought to justice, really, and for them to start paying the right amount of tax and the fair amount of tax. And surely that would raise billions and billions of pounds in the UK and other jurisdictions. Whereas we just seem to, make people pay these extra millions and billions of pounds, whereas these guys for years and years just seem to get away with it. So let's try and do a little bit more and bring in these guys to pay a fair amount of tax, use AI tools, use creative methods, bring stuff into law, and let's try and get some of these organizations to pay the right amount of tax, because surely that would raise billions and billions of pounds that way and cover any sort of black hole that we might have. So let's talk about the obvious start point, which is income tax. Now, income tax, let's just say taxes have gone up. Yes, the rates themselves haven't. So income tax bands have been frozen, and they've been frozen until 2031. However, because of a phenomenon known as fiscal drag, which basically means because of inflation and wage growth, people over time inevitably get pushed into higher tax brackets anyway. So in absolute terms, you end up paying more tax that way. So in effect, it's kind of like a stealth tax. It's not an explicit increase in your tax rate, but over time you are moved into a higher tax threshold, so you end up paying more tax. I think that was it was going to happen. It was a pretty safe bet. And it is a stealth tax, so you do end up paying more tax that way anyway. And remember the other things Rachel Reeves has done. There's taxes on dividends, and there's been tax increases on savings as well by, I think it was 2 percentage points. So savings is a form of income, dividends are a form of income. So those rates have gone up. So inevitably you are paying more tax explicitly through those mechanisms. So income tax as a whole has gone up. The other one was mansion tax. So this doesn't come into play till 2028. But basically what it means is homes over £2 million will be subject to tax. Now, this is a strange one for me. Two main reasons, really. Number one, it's not actually going to raise all that much money. I think the sort of figures that were quoted were in and around the 400 million mark. Which may sound like a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of things, when we're dealing in the billions and billions of pounds, 400 million probably doesn't quite hit home as some of the other taxes. But for this one, I feel, in my opinion, this is the one that's going to be the most difficult to sort of administer and stay on top of. It's going to require regular revaluations of properties. It's going to be subject to a lot of legal challenges or pushbacks. The amount of homes that'll be valued at 1,999, 995 or something like that, you'll see a definite spike there. And I see a lot of pushback, a lot of red tape, a lot of issues with this one. How they're going to collect it and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, it'll be via council tax, but I just see this one causing a lot of headaches. So this was a very, very strange one for me. So we'll see how that goes, but that doesn't come into effect till 2028. The big one was the cash ISAs, of course. So cash ISAs are now limited to £12,000 instead of £20,000. Obviously, you can still invest the full £20,000 in an ISA, but up to a maximum of £12,000 in terms of a cash ISA, and then you can put the balance into a stocks and shares ISA if you wish, and that applies for the under 65s. I sort of see why she's done this because the idea was to encourage growth in UK industries via the stocks and shares ISA. The problem is there are most people are pretty risk averse and they don't really understand the stock market, and it's not their fault. And a lot of this is down to education and the fact that some of this stuff just isn't taught in schools or at a younger age. Investing in the stock markets and that sort of stuff, unless you take specific courses in economics or business or something like that. But I feel that this is something that similar to the 3 R's, it should be taught at that sort of level at a young age. And I think if people were more educated and more aware of the stock market and how it works, and that over time you do end up making a greater return, then I think it would work. But I think because of a lack of education and understanding on this sort of stuff, I don't think it will necessarily have the impact that maybe Rachel Reeves was intending. So I think the idea is sort of right, but I think the execution not so much. So again, we'll see how that goes. But so that is going to be a major change to the ISA tax treatment. Pensions and salary sacrifice, again, a little bit. It's a little bit strange for me, this one. I think the salary sacrifice part, so that's where if you're on a private pension, your employer will put or sacrifice X percentage of your salary, and instead of it then being subject to income tax and national insurance, will go directly into your pension pot. And the employer then also has these national insurance savings, and they tend to recycle that, and they sort of do these matched contributions. So that will still be in play, but that will be to a maximum limit of £2,000 per annum. I find that one a strange one because the government are always saying, how they want to encourage people to save for the future. The state pension's only a limited amount of money. It's very tight, and people should sort of prepare for their own retirement and that sort of stuff. And salary sacrifice is a good way of doing that. It's a tax efficient vehicle. So the fact that they've clamped down on that one, I didn't get. It's sort of goes against their underlying message, but it was a way for them to obviously claw back some money. And then obviously with the state pension, the triple lock means that over time you will, because of the state pension threshold being kept frozen, you will actually over time the state pension will actually go above that threshold. So it could be that 70-year-olds and 80-year-olds are subject to tax. So do they now have to fill out a self-assessment form and pay tax back to the government at that age? What Rachel Reeves has sort of said since is that if that is their only source of income, then no. But if they've got other source of income, then yes, they would be subject to tax. So imagine an 80 and a 90-year-old having one other source of income and then having to do a self-assessment form. It just beggars belief. So that was those were obviously the main the main points of the UK budget. I feel it could have been worse, but it could have been a lot better. I feel that there's very little being done in terms of, as I said at the start, of certain organisations and companies that just get away with paying next to no tax. I feel like a lot more should be done there. I feel Rachel Reeves, she was caught a little bit between a rock and a hard place. I know she's, this is a Labour government, it's a socialist government. There was always going to be, the removal of the two-child cap. That was never going to be a surprise. They want to lift people out of poverty, which is always a good thing. But on the flip side, the opponents will say, well, why do I have to pay for someone else having 5 kids? So I can sort of see that. 6767. It's a little from column A, a little from column B. I see it from both ways. But yeah, the markets didn't react as badly as the Liz Truss budget. Yields, UK yields are always a good indicator of what the market thinks of the budget, and it was nowhere near a Liz Truss type, perhaps because of it was already sort of priced in. The expectation was already there. There wasn't a massive surprise to anything. But yeah, it was a typical Labour budget. I mean, I don't think it was anything that was too surprising. And it's I feel that things will unravel in the next few days. I feel that she has sort of misled the public on a few things, with the OBR and how bad the state of the finances were. The OBR actually said that we were in surplus to the tune of somewhere around 4 billion, and she's constantly been talking about this 20 billion black hole. So has she used that as an excuse to raise taxes and then to pay that away to in forms of benefits? So I think it will unravel a little bit. I think there is an element of misleading people there. It could be early New Year that some other things come out, and then she'll be put under pressure. But we'll see how it goes. But like I say, it was a typical Labour budget. I don't think there was anything that surprising in there. It was raised taxes. It was typical Labour. Let's high tax, high spend. So nothing of major surprise. I've gone way over 5 minutes, so I'm going to stop there. Hopefully this was useful, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.